and your personal data on Facebook, they say they own it forever. You can make your account private, but it's always there. They're using it. Social networks like Twitter, Facebook, and all of it, they have deep government ties. Google was set up with funding from In-Q-Tel, a company whose main client is the CIA. As Wayne Madsen reports, the CIA has always used the popular media of the day to push their propaganda. And today we see Facebook expanding their face recognition capabilities. I'm Darrin McBreen for INFOWARS Nightly News.
The American dream. There's a reason they call it a dream.
Who's there?
Cock-a-doodle-doo, pal.
No, 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 no! I don't have any more money! My job sucks right now, please! I'll have more money next month! You can't take my house!
Is that your signature?
It is a private bank owned by private stockholders.
A private bank?
Do not let the name Federal fool you.
If I got this money from the bank, and the bank got it from the Federal Reserve dump trucks, where does the Federal Reserve get their money?
They take our property away, just like Thomas Jefferson said they would.
Those sons of bitches!
It's the greatest theft in human history.
Welcome back. It's INFOWARS Nightly News on this Tuesday, September 13th, 2011 edition. The Health Ranger, Mike Adams, is going to be joining us in a moment to break down some of the stories that we're about to start covering here. First off, we've got some good news. TSA creator says dismantle, privatize the agency. We'll be talking more about that with Mike Adams. This out of Human Events, another victory showing no matter how much propaganda and how arrogant and hubris-filled the social controllers are, they will not break our will. Then we fight back. We can take back our society. Also, we're going to talk to Mike about another victory. Rick Perry is being attacked in every single debate he's in about trying to lie and force Texas schoolgirls to take a dangerous vaccine linked to many deaths and illnesses and other complications during the trials. There were even more deaths once he tried to mandate it. And so he's being torn up in the debates. And more good news is coming out as all the candidates basically turn against him, showing that our ideas that were laughed at 4 or 5 years ago when they were causing deaths in the trials are now becoming mainstream because we have facts and the truth on our side. It's also coming out that Merck paid legislators to pass mandatory Gardasil vaccine bill. And the numbers have come out, what they paid for the yes votes. We're talking $2,000 to $3,000 per person in the California legislature, some as low as just $1,000 to do this, when they make over $500 for the 3 rounds of shots. So you invest a couple $100,000 to buy all the legislatures off in a state, all the legislators, and then you get hundreds of millions, if not billions, per state by having them mandated. Also, SaneVax, Inc., reports that they found human papilloma RNA and DNA contamination in Gardasil to now have a FDA investigation. They are requesting that that happen, and that's out on the Business Wire today. So we're on the march. The empire is on the run. But the first reason I've got Mike Adams joining us tonight here at INFOWARS Nightly News, 7 o'clock weeknights here at PrisonPlanet.tv, is to get into this report. Because I read the whole thing this morning, and we posted it on INFOWARS.com as well as first finding it at naturalnews.com. And I found the research was really spot on from my own research. NASA's come out, the military, the Pentagon has come out. big corporations have come out, and they say the biggest national security threat to this country and the rest of the world right now is solar flares. The sun was really active a decade ago. It went somewhat dormant and now is back with a vengeance. And these are solar flares, tens of millions of miles long, thousands of times bigger than the Earth. And already just a few weeks ago, we had major cities on the West Coast with no power because of it. And they say even bigger ones are coming. And so this is a huge event. And the reason it's so important from my perspective is the system has got us so afraid of terrorists, whether it's real or manufactured. And you've got a better chance of dying by being struck by lightning, by even shark attack, honeybee attack, snake bite, than you do being killed by terrorists. So why is there all this, oh my gosh, we've got to have checkpoints everywhere and search everybody or Al-Qaeda is going to kill us? Since when did we become land of the cowards, home of the slaves? You know, old-timers knew, don't be a coward, because when your time comes, son, nobody can stop it. A solar flare could burn this planet to a crisp. But statistically, that's probably not what's going to happen, thank God. Statistically, it could cause electromagnetic pulse, much more powerful than any weapon system, and knock out every nuclear reactor on the planet or on the side of the planet facing the sun that's in daylight when the flare hits. And we already saw a big weapons plant that was mixing uranium and plutonium in France explode yesterday. And they said, don't worry, there's no radiation, but there were some deaths. Just like they lied to us for several months. Remember that? They lied to us for more than 3 months, saying there's no high radiation, there's been no meltdowns. Turns out 5 of the 6 reactors in Japan at Fukushima completely melted down. I knew that 3 days in when reactor number 3 with MOX fuel, plutonium, blew up, and I blew up the video and saw what looked like rods. I went and looked at the manufacturer of that 40-year-old General Electric system and learned that was a rod casing, not just from the rods stored on top, but internal rods. It completely blew sky high. They knew the isotopes showed there'd been a total meltdown, the biggest disaster in human history with nuclear systems. And our government's answer was raise the levels of what they say is safe radiation. So that's my commentary on the situation. Now, to go through it all is just a great patriot, somebody who is just doing so much wonderful work. Out of all the great people out there fighting corruption, I've got to say Mike Adams is right up there at the top from Natural News. Of course, he is the health ranger, and we're going to go through all of this, the solar flares, the vaccines, the TSA, and the fact that he narrowly has survived. You're talking just 100 yards away, helicopters dumping, putting out fires. So he can't be in studio because he's still got the fires at bay as he lives outside Austin, ravaged. Mike Adams, great to have you here with us.
Hey, Alex, great to be joining you. Thanks for having me on.
Mike, I've thrown out all these issues. What do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's talk about the solar flares. And now segueing from the fires of Central Texas, which were quite devastating. You know, I'm into personal preparedness, as you are, and most of your listeners are. But when those fires hit, I realized I had a huge gap in my preparedness plan. I did not have a fire respirator and fire gear. So I immediately made sure that I had that covered. And then, so I actually ordered products and got them in, and now I can actually fight fires to some degree that are in my front yard if I have to. But then I also began to ask questions, where else do I have gaps in personal preparedness? What are the real risks to safety, to growing food, to surviving on our planet? Now, you hinted at this. One of the things that the U.S. government does just maliciously and insidiously is they make people think that things that aren't dangerous are very, very dangerous, like so-called terrorism. And then at the same time, they ignore the things that are really dangerous and make them seem like they're not dangerous at all, like Fukushima, for example, or now what is theoretically a big risk of a big risk in our lifetime. Not today, not tomorrow, but over a human lifetime. It's a very real risk that a solar flare could knock out the power grid, and it could knock it out for years in some places, and it could disconnect power from the nuclear facilities that are trying to run coolant pumps to keep their fuel rods from going into a meltdown status.
Well, that's right, Mike. We are such a dependent society now, and technology is great, but it's a double-edged sword. It took 80 years or more to build our modern system. And when a little tornado comes through or hurricane, you can have places out for 3-4 months, and it's a national effort to get it back up. But if you have widespread systems knocked out, then it causes a cascading where you're literally knocked back to the Stone Age. And you're right. Yes. They estimate, because they've been studying the sun for more than 300 years in a modern scientific fashion, that these solar flares are a 100-year event. The problem is it appears we're entering one of those in the next decade. So you're right, it's a once-in-a-lifetime deal, but we're here. And 100 years ago, we didn't have these systems to be knocked out. But if you go back 100 years ago, there were events with solar flares that did blow out some of the early cities, that did have electrical systems, and it's happening now. And it's not just you saying this.
No, not at all. NASA has put out information about this. Oak Ridge National Laboratories actually calculated the risk of a large solar flare knocking out a nuclear facility, and it calculated that risk as being 33% over the 40-year lifetime of a typical nuclear power plant. So that's a 1/3 or 33 in 100 chance for every nuclear facility that exists out there. But the really, well, you could say good news or bad news is that these events, and the last big one was called the Carrington event in 1859. So that's pre-modern technology, that's pre-electrical grid for the most part, and that's pre-nuclear power plants all over the country.
Still made wash lines outside in some areas literally light up with electricity.
Exactly. They had telegraph lines, and power surged through the telegraph lines and actually lit up. And they could disconnect their batteries, and they could still send telegraphs in some areas because there was so much power surging through these lines. But modern civilization, with its reliance on nuclear power, and there are well over 400 nuclear power plants operating every day around the world, this system has never faced a Carrington-scale event, a solar flare, that could wipe out the power grid.
And underwriting laboratories,
Oak Ridge,
and other systems that carry out these inspections.
Oh, yes.
From my research, they've never even called for electronics and things to be even somewhat shielded. I mean, the establishment has known, at least in the last 50, 60 years, about this electromagnetic pulse and other things that the sun can cause, and they've made no preparation except in their systems. And this is almost like a nuclear war level type crisis, because we've got 7 billion people, more than half of them totally urban and dependent on technology. And if we were to have even a partial